Did you know that ever since a root parasite called phylloxera pretty much wiped out the entire South African national vineyard towards the end of the 19th century, almost all vines in South Africa, and in fact in the world, are no longer planted on their own roots. Instead, vine cuttings of your chosen cultivar have to be grafted onto the root system of a vine from a completely different species. This is because no one ever managed to completely eradicate phylloxera or to breed a vine that could survive or thrive against phylloxera and still produce wine that is actually worth drinking. And so it is that the rather clunky solution has always been to simply create a sort of Frankenstein vine, where one takes a badass phylloxera busting root system below the soil and grafts it on to support the pretty but oh so delicate cultivars that we know and love. I guess it's the viticultural equivalent of John Cena giving a piggyback to Timothy Chalamet. Now, in the same way that grape cultivars are all different to one another and have their own qualities and characteristics, their own vine vigor or their sensitivity to drought or to disease, well, so too do vine rootstocks. To give you a couple of examples, in South Africa, there's a rootstock called Richter 99 and another one called Richter 110. And both of these are quite popular in the dry South African winelands because they both develop very strong root systems that can dig down deep and reach water even when a water table is very low. Perfect for a drought-stricken region. But there are others as well. There's one called Riparia gloire, which is known to trigger very, very slow growth in a vine. And you might ask, why on earth would I want slow growth? Well, if you happen to have been blessed with very fertile soils, well, then the vines that you plant can grow out of control and have wild canopies and floppy arms that constantly need to be pruned and cut back and controlled. And this, of course, is very, very expensive from a labor perspective. So a rootstock like Riparia can slow all that down and reduce the amount of time you have to prune or cut back or manage your canopy, which reduces your labor cost. Of course, there are loads of other examples of wonderful rootstocks, but we really can't go through all of them now. But perhaps it's just enough for you to know that your choice of rootstock when planting a vineyard is just another node where deliciousness, or at least sustainability, can be won or lost. Now, today's HanDrinksSolo wine of the day is the Carinus Polkadraai Syrah 2021, which is planted on Ramsey rootstock, if you must know, another great choice for drought-stricken regions. Today's wine is really exciting from a whole number of angles, even if you don't get your jollies by spazzing out on rootstocks. First of all, this wine is made by an absolute legendary winemaker called Lucas van Logrenberg, who is a master of cultivars like Cabernet Franc, Cinsault and Syrah. But what's more, the fruit for this vine comes from the elevated ward of Polkadraai, kind of akin to a Grand Cru for South African Syrah. But not only is this wine made with fruit from a royal South African Grand Cru type region, but it's grown by some royal South African viticulturists in the form of the duo Hugo and Dani Carinus. Hugo and Dani come from a 5-generation line of grape farmers, and as we've said elsewhere, that kind of lineage develops in you the sort of grape farming intuition that just cannot be bought, even if you do happen to have the most advanced precision viticultural network with all of its vine sensors and AI algorithms. Dani and Hugo also have vineyards in a number of different wine growing regions in South Africa. Obviously, they have their vineyards in Polkadraai and Stellenbosch. They also have vineyards in Devon Valley, which is a more central ward, also within Stellenbosch. And then a little further flung, they have vineyards in the Swartland as well. I know I've talked before about grape farmers who choose not just to farm grapes, but rather to farm wine, or at least to farm understanding that every single decision that they make in the vineyard will affect the wine in the bottle. Dani and Hugo are exactly these sorts of farmers. For that reason alone, they have a crazy long queue of A-list winemakers lining up, fighting with each other to get hold of some Carinus fruit. Winemakers like Chris Olheit, like David and Nadia Sadi, or like Peter Allen Finlayson from Christallum and Gabrielskloof. Now, the upside of having all these famous winemakers fighting over your fruit is that when it comes to vinifying your own range, you can pretty much pick any one of them to do it for you. So when it comes to Dani's Shennons, he often asks Chris Olheit to do the trick. But as I've already said, for us, more excitingly, when it comes to his Syrah, he chooses an absolute Polkadraai master, Lucas van Logrenberg, who happens to make some of the best Syrahs in the country. I wish I could spend more time telling you how cool Lucas van Logrenberg is, but I can't. We need to keep moving. Well, when we get into the glass and give this guy a sniff, well, up front there's a really delightfully brooding nose, which got a bit of herbal sage, black olive brine, and of course the vibrant, quite fresh blackberries. But there's other stuff as well. There's a ever so gentle touch of sweeter vanilla, I assume oak-inspired. This Syrah, I guess, is a little bit of a departure from the more classic Caribbean Syrah, which comes from the vineyards just next door to this vineyard, which is all about garrigue and violets and white pepper and fennel all over the place. But still, it is a very, very complex, layered example of what Polkadraai Syrah can be. Now, when we give it a sip, you're just immediately struck by the elegance and balance of it all. The entry is just so silky, and there's this lovely wave of red plum fruit and a touch of cherry candy and sherbet in there as well. And all of this is wrapped in a sort of heady, herbal, spicy, rocket leaf pepper type note. As the fruit begins to fade a bit, you get a hint of slightly green sort of stemmy tannins joined by some really lovely, pristine white pepper spice. Ultimately, more than all the flavor notes one can mention, it's just the pure poise and balance of this wine that makes it so worth talking about. And I would also say that if you encounter some younger vintages, say the 22 or the 23, these are wines that will benefit from a year or two in the cellar. Okay, so that's all we have time for today, but if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the HANdrinksSolo YouTube channel, where we publish at least 6 videos each month that talk about things like wine science, wine history, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of the dynamic South African winelands.